Hello, my friends, and welcome. This is Father Marcus from the Costa Blanca Anglican Chaplaincy, speaking to you on Remembrance Day, the 11th of November, and wishing you well, of course. I've just had the great privilege of going and taking the service for the Royal British Legion over in Javia, and I have to say that I spent my time in the company of saints and heroes. I genuinely did. And I had the privilege of leading the service and preaching and speaking with them. And the reading that we had was reading from the Gospel of St. John. I'm going to read it to you now. Jesus said to his disciples, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you, so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because a servant does not know what the master is doing. But I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me. No, I chose you, and I appointed you to go and to bear fruit, fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. I am giving you these commands, so that you may love one another." Such a powerful reading on Remembrance Day, and part of the heart of the gospel of Jesus Christ about loving one another. I'm just going to set the scene, as I said, about being in the presence of heroes and saints. In the worldly way of looking at things, people who do great stuff are sometimes called heroes. And in the sort of religious and churchy way of looking at things, people who do great stuff are sometimes called saints. And I just want to set the scene a little bit. Max Maxwell, the president of the Aircrew Association, came to the service when the Bishop of Europe collated me as canon. And when he was writing to the Aircrew Association, talking about this, he said something about going to the canonisation of Father Marcus, which is very lovely of him to say that, but it's not quite what happened. Canonisation is when they make someone into a saint. And normally the practice happens sometime after they're dead. So that's not what happened to me. I haven't been canonised. I'm certainly not a saint. But the bishop made me a canon. He collated me to be a canon in the diocese. The reason I say that is because I want to think a little bit about saints and heroes. And I'm going to tell you the story of Edith Cavell. She was a Christian nurse who served as a nurse and matron in enemy-occupied Belgium during the First World War. And she was executed in 1915 for enabling around 200 Allied soldiers to escape to neutral territory. The night before her execution, she said, "Standing as I do in view of God and eternity, I realise that patriotism is not enough. I must have no hatred or bitterness towards anyone." Edith understood that Jesus' greatest love commands us to love our enemies as well as our neighbours and friends. As she took communion for the last time, the chaplain who was with her said, "We shall remember you as a heroine and a martyr." And she replied, "Don't think of me like that. Think of me just as a nurse who tried to do her duty." In the Anglican Church, we commemorate Edith Cavell on the 12th of October every year. This is such a moving story. And as I was thinking about it when I was preparing what I was going to say today, I decided that it made me want to talk about duty and doing our duty. And I do have to say that for me that sounds like it's very old-fashioned stuff. But here's the thing. You see, a lot of the people who were at the British Legion service I took, a lot of people who will be at the British Legion, at the memorial services up and down the country this coming weekend and in all of our churches, they will have something to do with disciplined organisations. Many of them will have some connections somehow with the military or the police. Organisations in which they are called to obey. In the church, clergy, they are called to obey. To get our licence, we have to make a declaration of assent to the teachings of the Christian faith. We have to swear an oath of allegiance to the Queen and an oath of canonical obedience to our bishop. And so we're used to the idea of being obedient to God and the Queen, along with anyone who's in a disciplined organisation. We understand it. We understand the whole concept of obedience. Sometimes obedience is really clear. You can do this, but you can't do that. And when it's nice and clear like that, sometimes that's really helpful. But sometimes obedience is a little less clear. Let me give you just a topical example. It's likely to make you smile, but also to make the point. Those Conservative members of Parliament who were ordered last week to vote in favour of changing the rules governing their behaviour, well, they were told what they had to do, only for the whole thing to be reversed the very next day. Not quite sure that there was absolute clarity in all of that. Sometimes, if we are in a disciplined organisation and the rules say one thing, our conscience might tell us something different. Edith, the lady in our story, Edith Cavell, was in German-occupied territory, and she helped soldiers on both sides of the conflict. She also enabled about 200 Allied soldiers to escape to the Netherlands. And for that, she was arrested and charged with treason. In her humility, she just said, when she was charged, that she was just trying, as a nurse, to do her duty. Was it her duty to obey the law of the land where she lived? Was it her duty to care for soldiers on both sides of that conflict? Was it her duty to carry on with what she believed was right, even when it put her and others in danger? Was it her duty to carry on when she was told not to? Was it her duty to risk her own life and to carry on knowing that it would cost her her life? She went over and above her duty. It was a question for her of self-preservation or caring for those in need. And inspired by Jesus' teaching and his command to love one another. And no one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Edith cared for those who were in need. They weren't necessarily her friends. And her strong Christian beliefs propelled her to help all of those who needed it, both Germans and the Allied soldiers. She was quoted as saying, "I can't stop while there are lives to be saved." So it was not just her friends. Today, on Remembrance Day, we remember all those who did their duty. We will never ever know what so many people went through, and indeed we'll never know what people continue to go through as a result of war and terror and conflict. But here's the thing. And it may be old-fashioned or not, and I do sound like I'm an old man myself when I talk like this. But here's the thing. You and I know, in this day and age, whatever our position, whatever our background, whatever our personal circumstances, we are called to do our duty. Deep down, you know what's right. Deep down in your mind, you understand what is important. I don't need to tell you that. But what I will say is this. If you take the time to look deep inside and to reflect on what you think and what you believe, and if you take the trouble to consider all of your relationships, those with your partners, with your families, with your friends, with your neighbours, the relationships you have with people in your community, the relationship that you have with this beautiful planet which we call home, and indeed your relationship with God. If you do all of that, then you will meet your soul. And once you have done that, once you have met your soul, you will have the joy, that absolute joy, trust me on that, of knowing how to do your duty. It's strange, isn't it? It's not until we think about it that we realise that doing our duty is the one thing that eventually will bring us joy. Jesus' message is clear, and the way of the world is different from that. Meet your soul, do your duty, and experience God-given joy.